Okay, hello everyone. It's Tracy Cromwell. I'm here on the Friday afternoon broadcast of your personal journey with food. And let me see, I want to fix this banner. If you're listening and coming to us via the podcast, this is recorded live. And so with live broadcasts, anything can happen. So I'm happy you're here as a viewer, and I'm so happy you're here as a podcast listener. And today I'm excited. I have a special guest with me, Jen ORyan, Dr. Jen ORyan, and I asked her to come on this broadcast because as an integrative nutrition health coach, what that means is that I work with clients and people to help them see that all aspects of our lives create our healthy life, create our healthy journey. And, we'd have to say that all of that is connected with our food and our relationship with ourselves. And so in those areas, we're looking at education, we're looking at career, relationships, social life, joy, spirituality, all of that, our work environment. And so I asked Jen to be on this show because she is an expert in human behavior and strategies in the workplace in regard to I&D, and I'm going to have her explain that soon. But Dr. Jen ORyan is an I&D strategist focusing on helping people build authentically inclusive and welcoming companies, and leveraging 2 decades of experience in the tech industry and a PhD in human behavior. She understands the challenges leaders can face in developing a culture of inclusiveness for employees, clients, and consumers. A data geek, and that's how I know you, was back. We worked together for a while in our past careers as a data geek. I know Jen is that. She's a data geek at heart. She brings an extensive grasp of how people interact with technology and with each other and with change. She's also the author of Inclusive AF, a field guide for accidental diversity experts, designed for anyone thinking about inclusion and diversity. IAF explains how to cultivate a more welcoming workplace. So Jen, Dr. Jen, thank you for being here. I'm so appreciative. And so I'm going to ask you the big question. What does I&D even mean?
Yes, thank you for having me. It is so good. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So inclusion and diversity, we use a lot of different ways. So it's inclusion, diversity, equity, belonging. There's a lot of different concepts that come together in that. But essentially, at the end of the day, what it means is not only cultivating these amazing diverse perspectives and way of looking at the world and different experiences into the workplace, but also valuing them and embracing them, because it's those differences in perspective and different ways of communication that really get to a better result. And so it's not just necessarily making sure that people are coming through the front door, but also once they're there, that they're heard and valued. And it really taps into this very human need of being seen as ourselves and being valued as ourselves. And so when we go into the workplace and organizations, we have to sometimes, start to compartmentalize. We have a tendency to conform to whatever the written or unwritten expectation is. And that can be very draining on humans. And it hampers creativity and innovation.
Wow. And so as an expert in this, well, number one, I should ask, what brought you to this? You're changing your career and deciding to become an expert in this.
I actually include myself in the accidental expert category. I spent the bulk of my career, including when we worked together, working in large organizations, primarily in tech. And I launched new products, new experiences, things like that. And that really shaped my understanding of not only the mechanics of how do you design a plan and, scope it out and all the possible ways that it could go horribly wrong. But also, how do you navigate people through that change? And how do you bring them along in the journey? Because everybody loves change until it impacts them. And then not so much. And so what I found was, as I was working through my doctorate program, I was also working with some inclusion and diversity organizations. And I have a lot of thoughts about things, but in my perspective, so many of them were doing it wrong, in my opinion. And because we're looking at it from, it should live in HR, it's a policy, It's we're going to send out a memo, everybody will get it, and that will just be our inclusion and diversity plan. And we really have to understand, again, not just the dynamics of rolling something out and change, but also inclusion and diversity initiatives can be very emotionally charged.
Absolutely.
And they can spark a lot of conversations that are difficult for people to have. And people often don't even realize why they're resistant to it, or they don't want to talk about it. And so that is what I feel is my calling in life, is making it really accessible and making it easier for people to have those conversations and really get to where they need to be.
Yeah, I think about that too with the concept of change. People have a hard time with change because the brain doesn't really like change, and the brain is afraid of change or anything that might obstruct or hamper, the safety of the person that's carrying it. And so working through change is it's difficult sometimes for people. And I've been on that side where in the corporate America, and the change was coming, and that brain was on fire, not happy, whatever was happening, because you feel like your life is not your own, and you have just like you just have no opinion or anything like that. You can feel kind of lost, I guess, to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also somewhat of an existential crisis because, the world I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. And that's the way it should be, right? But so at a certain point, I think some people are like, well, who am I here? And I don't want to do anything wrong. And so I just don't do anything. And that is in many ways how I kind of liken what I do with the whole inclusion, diversity, belonging, with that overall health and nutrition, because it isn't just one thing. And it is also just that one thing. So it's the one thing that you can do every day that changes the trajectory in very impactful ways.
Yeah.
But having an understanding of how does the decisions that I make, working with another person and speaking to another person, and the language that I use, how does that make small changes? Much in the same way that, what if I just ate a healthy piece of chicken instead of, power bars for lunch every day, which may or may not be what I had for lunch today.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that later. No. So in this aspect, we wanted to talk about the importance of mindfulness and intentionality with inclusion, equity and diversity, and equality. What are your thoughts on the importance of our own personal mindfulness and intentionality towards this?
I think one of the biggest not drawbacks, but the biggest obstacles for really getting to an inclusive and welcoming workplace is this concept of, we've got this culture of busy. Like, everybody's so busy. And there's this tendency in organizations to say, we can't do it now, but we will definitely do it when things slow down, or we'll definitely do it when we have more budget, except we never have more budget and things never slow down. So it is that very intentional stopping of, we're going to do the internal work that we need to do as an organization and see what we can start to change in the next 30 days, the next 6 months, the next 3 years, that kind of thing. And being intentional, not only in the design, but in getting a sense of the lived experience of the population that's being served. And so, does that population think it's a problem? Are they part of the conversation? Do they agree that the solution is actually going to address all of the underlying issues? And rather than just saying, okay, we got to put out a marketing slogan to show that we're inclusive, and we've got a hiring thing next month, and so we just kind of do it to get it out there, and really focusing on what could be the unintended consequences and things like that.
Right. And I think everything you said too, I know we're talking in reference to a company and a workplace, but that means people. So what you just said, is even about looking at ourselves, and having those conversations with ourselves about, are we viewing life with that inclusion, equity, and diversity, or are we stuck, like you just said too, in a past that really doesn't exist and doesn't fit anymore? That never, well, in my opinion, never fit to begin with. But,
exactly. It's taking a step back and really evaluating, like, when I talk about health, when I talk about wellness, when I talk about, being welcoming, inclusive to everybody, what does that really mean? And it does take a step back and see what is serving you. What are the words that I'm using that are outdated and could cause offense? And how am I showing up?
Yeah. How am I showing up? And I think too, again, we think about the brain and it doesn't like to be challenged. It doesn't want change. And there's grief with change of mindset, you know, and I try and look at myself and where I come from and my background and what I was taught. And that's pretty much the only vision I can come forward with. But I think about, okay, I like to say, I have to realize that I don't know what I don't know. You know, am I willing to step out and learn? And am I willing to, let go of things that I'm realizing maybe they serve me independently, but they don't serve everybody else. They don't serve the community. And how can I as a person, walk through that and work through that and be willing to, I guess, take the rose-colored glasses off and be willing to see, everybody.
Yeah. And it can be really difficult because I don't know what it's like to walk through the world as someone who is different than I am. Right. But I can be open to the fact that there are vastly different experiences, and those are very real experiences, and being open to being challenged. And as you said, do the work of, I show up, I look a certain way, my message is going to land differently when I communicate that way. And when I intervene, it will land differently. And using that to really make space for other people's voices. Yeah. Because it's not an erasure. It's not, you know what I mean? We're building a bigger stage for everybody to get in on.
Well, I see it as growth. How can we grow as a human race and realize that we are all human beings, and everybody has a place in our amazing world, and how can we create environments where that is established and felt, and if we can take that, how do I want to say this? I don't know, that again, it's the brain being fearful. If we can release that wall and be okay with that and say, hey, it is so nice to take that wall down.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to share a story, and I don't want to name which building it is, but there is a major event center in our city that has security lights that automatically go off after a certain hour. And to go back in, it's almost like a motion detector, right? So to go back in, you go back into this room and you motion, and the lights come back on. And the only motion detector is in the men's bathroom and the men's locker room. They didn't think to put one in any of the other bathrooms because the only people who are there at night are typically security, maintenance, and at that time they're all men. And it didn't occur to them to do this. So that's where you would take a step back and say, okay, well, this is the way it's structured now, but what if it wasn't structured like that? What if there were other people here? And I know that seems like really a tangent, but it didn't occur to them that non-male humans would ever be in the building after 10 o'clock. So why bother with it?
Yeah. And it is interesting. And I think too, maybe, because I think there is fear of realizing someone's been doing it wrong or thinking, what I mean, but just saying, hey, this is a world that we're always learning. And I guess I want to say too, I'll go on a little tangent here as well, is the NCAA basketball situation.
Yes.
Women's locker room, and so it just, I think that as companies, as human beings, we can get caught in a rut. Well, it's just always the way it's been.
And we start to think that that's because it's the way it's meant to be.
Yeah.
But it isn't. Yes. Yes. And that's the other thing. That's the other thing we see a lot with toxic work cultures, even if it doesn't rise to the level of bullying. Because I liken it to like a carbon monoxide leak, right? Or some kind of natural gas leak where it's really just so insidious and it's so under the wire and you can't really put your finger on why it feels unhealthy. But everybody just leaves feeling really bad. And disengaged and not valued. And it doesn't need to rise to the level of actual bullying, but it's that sense of, well, our department's always kind of been like that. So this is really just what it's like. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. We can change it.
Yeah.
We can change it.
Absolutely. And, next I was thinking about talking about understanding emotional labor of marginalized populations and our role or companies' roles, people's role of doing the work. What do you mean in that regard? Like, what can people do in that statement?
Yeah, and it's such a delicate balance, right? Because so if I go into an organization, or if somebody else is looking at, finding out what's really going on, the first thing they typically do is gather some data. And so the easiest way to do that is send out an anonymous survey or have some interviews, focus groups, things like that, and figure out what's actually going on in the daily interactions. But the difficulty is that, one, you need the perspective of the people who are actually there, who are actually in the environment. But then it can also be really tiresome to have the same questions asked again and again and again, and ask these typically marginalized population to educate us and tell us, and and share their stories that they may not want to, or may not be ready for, or may have already done it 10 times and nothing's ever changed. So why do they? And so it really is a balance between finding out how you can get that valued information without putting all of the burden once again on an individual or individuals. I mean, I am a huge fan of participatory research, because that puts people in typically marginalized populations as the expert of their experience. And it gives them a space to tell us on their own terms what is actually going on, and bring that to the table. But I think it's just so invaluable to have that. But again, there's also a lot of emotional fatigue, and they may have lived their whole lives sharing this again and again and again, experience it over and over, and it just becomes completely exhausting. Exactly. I mean, I'm going to go to my example of the event center bathroom, right? So imagine I was there on site and I couldn't go in to make that motion to turn the lights back on, and now I'm complaining or asking for it to be changed, and all of a sudden I'm standing out as someone different and a troublemaker, and she doesn't need to be here anymore, and maybe I'm not put on a priority shift or something like that. And it's that slow diminishing because I asked for something that was equitable. And it's a very banal example, but it's exactly that. Do you speak up because it could limit your career, or do you just kind of go along, get along?
Yeah, and it's true. It's one thing I learned. I thought I knew, or I could interpret what was happening to other people, in their lives. And I realized I have no clue. And I think, I own that. I know what I experienced through my eyes and the frustrations I've had. And I have learned it's not up to everyone to educate me on it. It's up to me to get my education in the inequities of what's going on, and it's up to me as a person. Granted, yes, I feel the aspect of being a woman, and knowing that in my past careers I made a lot less money. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like in the experience of trying to be seen as someone capable of a significant career, running a company. I know that, but I don't know really what it's like to be in the shoes of other people. But I do know that I need to respect that and respect their stories, and that it. And I would challenge, other people to say, "Hey, do your homework, right? It's not up to." I've learned that significantly the last 24 months, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, and there's no more time to stand on the sidelines. Like this is we're all in this, and we've got to stand up. I mean, that's the thing. I was in a conference a few years ago, and it was about race and gender and its influence on how we see ourselves and how we interpret ourselves in the world and how we interact with others. And this woman, I same coming up in a male dominated industry. I've been talked over. I've been, had people co-opt my ideas and represent it and echo it back, and everybody's like, "Oh, fantastic idea." I'm like, I literally just said that same thing. And being valued and being seen as less experienced because of how I look. But the thing is that I was in this conference, and the example was something about feeling unsafe and people of color who have to have the talk with their kids about what to do when they get pulled over. And that is a very real situation that has been going on forever. But people who are white and insulated from that, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that conversation in this conference was a woman was saying, well, I've been followed around a store before. White woman was saying, I've been followed around the store before. And yes, it's a nuisance, but is it really discrimination? And I'm like, were you ever afraid for your life when you were being followed around in the store? Like, were you afraid that actually get to the point that the police would be called and then your life would be in jeopardy? No. So yes, it's annoying, but this is a very completely different stratification and spectrum that people are having to navigate day to day.
It's a much deeper level.
Yeah.
You know, and I know there was an experience I had, and it's a frustrating part being a woman. I know that, you know, but I was young. I think I was down at Portland, University of Portland. It's the 80s, and I was walking. I just bought a train ticket to go home, and I wanted to save bus money, so I walked from the train station. I was going to walk up, you know, south in Portland, and then walk across the bridge to where I lived. And then this bus pulled over, and the bus was empty, and the bus driver said, "Hey, you know, do you want a ride?" And I was like, "Oh no, I didn't want to take the ride." And he goes, "No." He goes, "Do you want a ride?" And I said, "Oh, it's okay, I can walk." He goes, "Get on the bus." And so I get on the bus, and he had come up, and some person had been following me on this back street of Portland. And so I know what it's like that way. And it makes me mad that I cannot walk somewhere and that women can't walk somewhere because somebody can't keep their hands to themselves or whatever it is. So I get very frustrated. And then we add a layer of that to someone who has different color skin than me, it's different gender bias, space, you know, whatever it is, you know, and that someone has to walk in fear. You know, it's just, it frustrates me. So I just, you know, just because somebody's, you know, different than us. So
the good thing is that most of the people that I've run into are kind of, if you go like on one end, there is the people that we're just champions for this, and we advocate for this, and we push and push and push, and we're totally in. And then there's people on the other end that for whatever reason will never come to see change. They can't reconcile it, myriad reasons. But in the middle is a sweet spot of people that I like to call ambivalence, because they, for whatever reason, have never had to think about that. They've never had to think about their race, or they've never had to think about gender. They've never had to think about what it's like to have mobility issues or PTSD and neurodiversity and all the different things that make us ridiculously chaotic humans so incredible, right?
Yes.
So there's so many people, and it's never occurred to them. And those are the ones that I focus my energy on, because those are the individuals that I can have a conversation with, and they're going to tell me their perspective, and I'm going to share mine, and we're going to find that common ground, and I'm going to bring them around. Because most of those people, I mean, especially when we're talking about innovation, right? If you can't take information that is totally new and integrate it, then you're going to get left behind. That's just the reality. If you're a human or a company, if you can't evolve, you're going to get stuck. And so that's typically what I look for. And I traffic in possibility. What's possible? What can we do in the next 30 days? What can I do as an individual as far as educating myself, looking at the language that I do? So much of what I do right now, honestly, is around content review, because in things like employee handbooks and guidelines and training and marketing messages and things like that are so steeped in these stereotypical images and outdated language, because nobody wants to go through a legal agreement that they wrote, 3 years ago. And so I've actually been going through some of the company's items, and they still have he as a default pronoun in so many situations. It's like, that's so easy to fix.
Yeah.
Once you see it, right? And so that's my encouragement to anybody who's listening to this, is just never underestimate an individual's ability to make a change.
Yeah. I think too, one thing I wanted to bring up too for, marginalized populations or those that are treated unequally, it's not like somebody wants to take away from anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's not like me as a woman, I want to take away from somebody, say a man. I don't want to take away his success and his income or anything, but I would just like to be able to, for the same, capabilities or whatever, be able to have the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to say. I think that's what everyone's trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm assuming that. If I'm doing that wrong, let me know.
Well, and that's the beauty of it, right? Is we're all going to get it wrong. I get it wrong. I screw things up all of the time. I was talking to somebody, a colleague last week, and I said, "Oh, the mailman's here," and I'm like,
I know.
Because these are words that we learned when we were 4, right? And our brain doesn't want to let go of it, because we have an amazing capacity for vocabulary. But as you said, our brain doesn't want to invest energy in that. It's got to conserve energy for Scrabble, or I don't know, TikTok. What are the kids doing these days? TikTok.
I know. Well, how would you, and I know, and I meant to say, this is only part 1 of our 3-part series. So we're going to be doing this, next Friday and the Friday after, to really try and help people, number 1 in the workplace. And also, I think everything that you're teaching us is going to help us in our personal lives. But if we were to start today, and I know you had some homework for us. So
yes.
We have so what should we do in your recommendation?
So for the overachievers, yes, there's homework from this broadcast. So the biggest thing is noticing when you're noticing the absence of people who don't look like you. And I'm not saying make a lot of assumptions because somebody looks like me, they think like me, and, making assumptions about gender and orientation, attraction, things like that. Just leave space for the person to tell you their story, but notice when you are the only one of me, or when there's nobody else who doesn't look like me, and just take a step back and see, what does that feel like? Where is everybody else? Is it like a group of self-selecting, like we all live in the same neighborhood and we all look the same, or what is that? And then really figure out, how do we bring in other voices and perspectives? And then the other one is modeling behavior and evaluating the language and the words that you use, just like mailman. We've all got one of those in our back pocket. And what other words would you use that really are gender nonspecific?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's true. It's just habit. And habits are challenging. Like, again, like with food, we want to bring in new habits for food or exercise or whatever, and there's days it's tough and hard to remember and everything. And this is just, I think, another aspect. I think as growth as human beings, it's not going to be without challenge. I'm dropping, I know I say male person, because I know I have men, women, and all that, different male person every day.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and that's the thing, though, is if it's like my brain is like, oh, I've only got 10 minutes. I'm going to grab a power bar and Coke Zero, and that's going to be lunch, and they'll be fine because I'm so busy. And again, stop with the busy. I don't have 6 minutes to boil an egg. I don't have to stand there and watch the egg boil. I could probably just put that on. And it's little things like that, like carving out the time and being intentional about what you can do.
Yeah. Incredible people come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, and talent and skill set. And, when we exclude, we as humans are really just, how do I say this, harming our communities. We're harming each other. And because community is such a big part of who we are and our health, it really is upon us, and to really open our eyes and start saying,
Yeah, exactly. Because when you filter yourself, somebody might need to hear what you have to say. Someone might need to hear your message. And if you filter yourself or you don't show up or you don't take that chance and raise your hand and push back and challenge, you're missing out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, darn, it's already 1 o'clock.
You have to stay tuned for part 2.
Yes. So we'll be back next week for more education from you. I so appreciate it. This is something that's just important to keep talking about and learning about. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us. And you have a book. I want to make sure I'm going to put this on the banner. You do have a book available, right?
I do have a book available. It launched in September, and it is because not everybody wants to work with a consultant, and not everybody is interested in that. It is a 3-part field guide for launching inclusion and diversity initiatives.
Okay. A field, I'm putting it in the comments here. Field guide. Whoops. Guide for accidental. Now that makes sense.
Yes. And if the title inclusive AF gives anybody any pushback, just pretend that I didn't know field guide was one word. So just pretend it's inclusive, a field guide.
I love it. Okay. And it's on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon. It's also on Powell's. I have never been so excited as, North Pacific Northwest native to I shouldn't even say that. Born in the Pacific Northwest. Very excited to have that up in Powell's. So that makes me happy.
Powell's?
You can get online at Powell's.
Yay. Okay. I hope I have that right. A field guide for accidental diversity experts. Amazon and Powell. Yeah. So I think even if I think everyone can learn something from that book, I'll go ahead and I'm going to get my copy as well. And and then thanks again. And I will see you next Friday.
Sounds good. All right.
Okay. Take care. Stay on though, Jen, and I'll close down the broadcast. Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Talk to you soon.